For more than 70 years, the sea held its ghastly secret close beneath stifling silence. Deep beneath the East China Sea's surface, where sunbeams never penetrate and the water's weight bears down relentlessly, there lay a World War II-era submarine in silence. It had disappeared without being seen, leaving behind unanswered questions, shattered families, and a silence no historian could seal. But when the submarine was finally found, what was inside was nothing less than ghastly. Divers and experts who looked into the wreckage anticipated rusted metal, rubble machinery, and the skeletal shape of a war machine eaten away by time. What they found was far more disturbing, a frozen horror, a haunting preservation of disaster that jolted even veteran researchers to their very foundations. It was a find so horrific it upended our understanding of war and remembrance. Could the wreck be concealing the Pacific War's darkest unspoken chapter? If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. The gruesome find within the missing World War II submarine became known during the summer of 2019 when, after decades of attempts that ultimately failed and questions that remained unanswerable, a research mission delivered closure to one of the war's most chronicled enigmas. On a hot June day, the research ship RV Petrel crawled along the East China Sea. Its passenger, Tim Taylor, was an underwater researcher whose career had been spent searching for what happened to submarines that went missing during war. Ever since years back, everyone from families to naval historians and researchers had wondered what was the fate of the USS Greyback. With new technology, new leads, and dogged persistence, Taylor and his crew were on the verge of the truth. The USS Greyback was no ordinary submarine. She was of the Tambor class, a high-end design for her day, with increased endurance, heavier firepower, and the capacity to hit deep inside enemy waters. Her history got underway in Groton, Connecticut, at the Electric Boat Company shipyard on April 3, 1940. She was launched into the Thames River in January 1941, christened with ceremony and promise, a product of the new naval power. She was formally commissioned to service on June 30 of that year, under the command of Lieutenant Willard A. Saunders. Her initial months consisted of training cruises, drill and shakedown cruises, nothing that suggested the bloody fate that would await her. But in December 1941, when Japanese forces attacked Pearl Harbor, the world had changed forever. America was now at war, and in February 1942, the Greyback was steaming for Pearl Harbor to enter the bloody fray for domination of the Pacific. The years that followed were ones of success and danger in equal proportion. Patrol after patrol, the Greyback instilled fear in Japanese shipping routes. She stalked supply convoys, sank cargo carriers, and disrupted critical logistics. Every mission was risky, every encounter a razor's edge between survival and destruction. But the Greyback and her crew gained a reputation for unparalleled skill and courage. Their names were placed on naval reports as proof of America's determination at sea. But fate, as it always does in war, had other ideas. On January 28, 1944, the submarine sailed out on what would be her last patrol. Her instructions were simple: patrol the East China Sea, interdict Japanese shipping, and maintain the constant pressure against an already overstretched enemy. For weeks, she did just that. On February 24, messages verified that she had sunk 2 freighters. On February 25, a message reported the sinking of a tanker and damage to an assault transport. Her triumphs were hailed, but those words were the last ever heard by the Greyback. Silence followed after February 25. Weeks went by. The Navy waited for her to show up on her prearranged return point. Families waited for word, holding on to hope. But by March 30, 1944, the Greyback had been officially listed as lost at sea with all 80 men on board. Families were dealt a crushing blow. Parents wept, wives wondered about their futures, and children grew up hearing half a story about fathers who did not return. Generations were defined by sadness and questions that had no answer. Why could the submarine not be located? For decades, the explanation was hidden in the war archive details. Japanese wartime diaries logged the loss of an American submarine, but when they were translated after the war, a solitary digit in the latitude and longitude was incorrectly translated. This tiny mistake diverted the search area by almost 100 miles. For years, treasure hunters searched the wrong seas, following ghosts, never with anything. Then, in 2018, a Japanese researcher poring over Imperial Navy records discovered the error. With the right coordinates, Taylor and his crew of the Lost 52 project finally knew where to search. Employing sophisticated sonar imaging and remotely operated vehicles, they set out to sweep the ocean floor. And in June 2019, they discovered her. The Greyback was 1,427 feet down, her hull amazingly well preserved after 75 years in the water. But alongside her conning tower, the proof of her end was evident, a ragged, gaping hole. They concluded she had been hit by an air bomb, probably while surfaced for battery recharge. The blast ripped through her pressure hull. There would have been instant, uncontrollable death. No one on board could have lived. As the cameras investigated the wreck, the most chilling find was made. The crew of 80 skeletons were still inside, their bones frozen in ghostly silence. Some of them still sat at their stations, faithful to their duties until the end. Others were huddled about escape hatches, frantic in their last moments of desperation to get out. Lines of skulls and bones testified to the violence and desperate fight. For the professionals gazing down from overhead, it was overwhelming. Even veterans, toughened by decades of wreck exploration, were shaken, fighting to cope with the grim fact. Word of the discovery had spread rapidly, reaching the families of the lost. It brought long-sought closure for some. For others, it reopened old wounds that never entirely healed. One crewman's niece said her uncle was bigger than life in family legend, but never present in fact. Now, she said, they at last knew where he was. Relief and sadness commingled, as decades of not knowing gave way to the finality of fact. The U.S. Navy verified the find, with Robert Nayland, director of the Naval History and Heritage Command's Underwater Archaeology Branch, stating that this was not only a historical discovery but also an act of respect to the 80 men who did not return home. A somber ceremony took place above the wreck site. Families arrived, with photos and memories. Navy officers stood at attention as taps rang out across the water. Wreaths lay softly on the water, passing over the grave of the Greyback. It took 75 years, but the men were at last recalled not as lost, but as honored dead. The find also stirred renewed interest in the service history of the submarine. 307 feet long, more than 2,300 tons submerged displacement, and 10 torpedo tubes put the Greyback in the category of sea predator. Her achievement was remarkable: 14 hostile ships sunk, more than 63,000 tons of Japanese shipping lost. She had been among the most successful ships of her type. But her loss served to underscore the danger of submarine combat. Conditions aboard were cramped, sweltering, and claustrophobic. Crews lived amidst the reek of diesel oil, slept in rotation, and endured the constant fear of depth charges crashing down on them from hostile destroyers. At any time, the steel compartment encasing them might become their coffin. The Greyback's last patrol was testament to the effectiveness and its vulnerability. One bomb dropped at the wrong time sealed her fate in a matter of seconds. Her sinking was not only a disappointment to the U.S. Navy's strategy but also to the morale of her crewmen. Nevertheless, her legacy lived on, her name embedded in battle rolls, her tale told among submariners as a cautionary tale of the perils of the deep. Since her rediscovery in the intervening years, memorials have been raised, plaques have been inscribed, and artifacts exhibited. Museums have displayed shards of her hull, equipment, uniforms, and personal items salvaged from the wreckage. Every artifact has a tale to tell: a battered helmet, a frozen watch, a wrench set down in progress. Communities have conducted remembrance services, reading out the names of the deceased, placing flowers, and making sure their children know the price of liberty. Outside of the Greyback, the larger narrative of World War II submarines comes into view. Noisemakers of their day, these silent hunters were among the most dreaded weapons of the war. Germany's U-boats preyed on the Atlantic, and American submarines choked Japan's lifelines in the Pacific. Submarines revolutionized naval warfare, compelling nations to create new defenses such as sonar, depth charges, and convoy escorts. But they were also brought with enormous human price. Of the U.S. Navy's 288 war-serving submarines,